At his own retirement party, in front of 200 guests, Desmond Cole picked up a microphone he had no business holding and announced that he was leaving his wife of 26 years. Not quietly, not later in private, the way most men manage to end a marriage with some shred of decency intact. He did it standing under the chandelier of the Marriott ballroom, glass of champagne in one hand, microphone in the other, while the band paused mid-song and 200 faces turned toward the small round table where Alina Cole sat in a navy blue dress she had chosen because it was his favorite color on her. 26 years, he said, and I finally get to say what I've wanted to say for at least 10 of them. I'm not the man I used to be, and she never once kept up. Somewhere near the bar, a fork clattered against a plate. Alina did not flinch. She set down her wine glass with a soft, deliberate click and folded her hands in her lap, and she looked at her husband the way you might look at a stranger who has wandered into the wrong room, with mild, distant curiosity and no fear at all. Beside him, a woman named Bianca Farrow stood in a champagne-colored gown, 22 years younger than Alina, her hand resting on Desmond's forearm like she'd already signed the paperwork. She was smiling the way people smile when they believe they've already won. "You're going to sit there," Desmond said, louder now, "and not even say anything. That's exactly the problem. That's been the problem the whole time." Alina rose slowly from her chair. The room went utterly silent, the kind of silence where you can hear ice settling in a glass 3 tables away. She did not raise her voice. She simply said, "Sit down, Desmond. You're going to want to hear this part." And that was the moment, the exact moment, his face changed, because for the first time in 26 years, his wife wasn't asking him for anything. She was telling him. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand why Alina didn't break that night, you have to go back 17 years to a duplex in Macon, Georgia, with a leaking roof and a landlord who never picked up the phone. Desmond was 28 then, selling insurance door to door in a suit he'd bought secondhand, and Alina kept the books for 2 dentists' offices and a small trucking outfit, balancing other people's accounts to the penny, while their own bank balance sat somewhere south of comfortable. They didn't have much. What they had was a cedar keepsake box that had belonged to Alina's mother, and on quiet Sunday nights they'd sit at the kitchen table and write down what they wanted their life to look like someday. Desmond always wrote the same thing first, a company with my name on the building. Alina wrote something smaller, a home nobody can take from us. He used to laugh at that, told her she thought too small. She let him believe it because back then his ambition felt like something she could shelter under, not something that would one day be turned against her. The insurance job became a small logistics brokerage. The brokerage became Cole Freight Solutions, with an actual building and an actual name on it, exactly the way he'd written it down all those years before. And somewhere in that climb, a man named Marcus Reyes became his business partner, and, Alina believed, something closer to a brother. Marcus had been the best man at their wedding. He'd held their daughter the night she was born, packing hospital hallways at 3 a.m. so Alina could sleep. He came to every holiday. He called Alina sis so often that her own siblings started saying it as a joke. She trusted him the way you trust a floor you've walked on 10,000 times, which is to say, she never thought about him at all. The first small crack came the way cracks always do, quietly, easy to explain away. Desmond started taking calls in the garage instead of the kitchen. Late nights got blamed on the Rays deal, as if the name itself were an excuse that needed no further detail. A new financial advisor called the house and asked only for Desmond, and grew flustered when Alina answered. She noticed. She said nothing. She had learned, somewhere in those 17 years, that a quiet question keeps far longer than a loud one. The morning that split her life into a before and an after started like any other. Desmond was at a meeting he'd over-explained at breakfast, which she'd learned by then was exactly how he lied. The truth was always short, and the lies came dressed up in detail. She went into his home office looking for nothing more than a spare car key. What she found instead was a folder that was usually locked away, left carelessly on the desk. She could have closed the drawer. She thought about it, thought about all the years of not looking, all the small mercies of staying comfortable. Then she opened it anyway, because a woman who has spent her whole life balancing other people's numbers cannot, in the end, leave her own unexamined. She sat down in his leather chair and read it once, then a second time, because her mind refused the first reading. The family trust, the one holding her mother's small inheritance and the equity in their home, had been pledged as collateral against a business loan she had never once been told about. Her name was on the signature line. It wasn't her signature. It was close enough to fool a bank teller and wrong enough in its small, hesitant loops to gut the woman whose name it borrowed. She sat with that for a long moment. Then she turned the page and found the second signature, the one that stopped her breath completely. Witnessing and co-signing the entire arrangement was Marcus Ray's. And clipped behind it, a private side letter. If the marriage ever dissolved and the joint assets were liquidated, Marcus would receive 20% of everything, the house, the trust, all of it, in exchange for having quietly structured the loan to make the fraud invisible on paper. Two men had sat in some comfortable office and put a price on the end of her marriage. One of them had held her newborn daughter and cried actual tears in a hospital hallway while doing it. She did not cry. She did not sweep the papers off the desk. She went very still, the way deep water goes still on the surface while everything underneath keeps moving. And for the first time since she'd walked into that office, she began, quietly, carefully, to think. She didn't confront him. That single choice changed everything that came after. She photocopied every page at a print shop 3 towns over, paying cash, and tucked the copies into her mother's cedar box, beneath the old letters and the folded-up dreams from a kitchen table 17 years gone. Then she drove to the office of a lawyer named Priscilla Odom, who worked out of a converted house above a bakery and had a quiet reputation for being nearly impossible to beat once she took a case. Alina didn't come to her in tears. She came as a client with a folder, and she said 6 words, "I need to know what's real." Priscilla read every page in silence, her face giving nothing away, and when she finally looked up, her expression had shifted into the look of someone who just realized the woman across the desk was far stronger than her circumstances suggested, and considerably more dangerous to the wrong people. Here's the part most people miss when they watch a story like this. The strongest move is rarely the loudest one. It's the one made in total silence, at the exact instant the other side is certain they've already won. Over the following weeks, a handwriting examiner confirmed in writing what Alina already knew. The signature on the loan wasn't hers, and never had been. The bank quietly opened a fraud file. Priscilla prepared documents that could freeze every account tied to the scheme the moment they were filed. And this is where the story turns, because there was a second discovery Alina hadn't expected. Buried in an email chain attached to the loan documents, she found something Desmond himself didn't fully know yet. Marcus had been quietly moving to buy out Desmond's remaining shares in the company at a steep discount, using leverage from the very fraud he'd helped build. Desmond thought he was betraying his wife to build a bigger empire. He didn't realize his own partner was 3 months from taking that empire out from under him, too. Alina kept that detail to herself, not out of mercy, out of patience. She understood, better than almost anyone Priscilla had ever represented, that a man who believes he's already won stops watching his own back, and that was worth more to her case than any warning could ever be. Desmond, for his part, noticed nothing. He grew careless in the specific way of men who believe the game is already over. He booked the retirement party. He booked Bianca a hotel suite 2 floors above the ballroom and didn't bother hiding the receipt in his jacket pocket, because in his mind, the woman he'd married was already gone, already beaten, already furniture he intended to leave behind in a house he believed was entirely his. 3 nights before the party, Marcus came by the house for what he called old time's sake, really to feel out how much Alina knew, though he'd never have admitted that to himself. She poured him coffee, the same way she always had, and asked him one quiet question about the funding structure of a deal she wasn't supposed to know existed. A question worded precisely enough that only someone who'd read the actual documents could have asked it. His easy laugh caught hard in his throat. His eyes flicked toward the door, then back to her, searching her face for what she knew. She only smiled and refilled his cup. That was the moment the balance of the whole thing quietly tipped, though Marcus couldn't have told you why, and wouldn't understand it until it was far too late to matter. And so we returned to the ballroom, to the chandelier and the microphone and Desmond's voice ringing out over 200 stunned guests. Except now you can see the whole shape of it, the way you can finally see a darkened room the moment someone reaches over and turns on the light. He believed he was delivering the final blow to a woman with no defense left. He didn't know he'd walked, proudly, into the center of hers. Elena reached into her handbag and lifted out her mother's cedar box, worn soft at the corners, and set it on the table in front of her. She opened it slowly, without hurry, the way a woman opens something she has never once been afraid of losing. "Sit down, Desmond," she said again, and this time he sat, because something in her voice left him no other option. She laid the first page on the white tablecloth. "This is a loan taken against our home. I never signed it. A handwriting examiner confirmed the forgery 2 weeks ago." She laid down the second page. "This one pledges my mother's entire inheritance as collateral. She cleaned office buildings for 30 years to leave that money behind." She laid down the third page and lifted her eyes to find his across the table. "And this is the agreement that pays Marcus 20% of everything we own the moment our marriage ends. You didn't just plan to leave me, Desmond. You sold me, and Marcus signed his own name to the sale." The room had gone past silent into something deeper, the ringing quiet of 200 people realizing they were witnessing something true. Bianca's hand slid off Desmond's arm. "The accounts were frozen this morning," Elena continued, her voice never rising, never cracking. "Before either of you walked into this room, whatever you were planning to fund with that money, it's gone. It's evidence now." Desmond opened his mouth and found nothing inside it, because there is no argument a man can make against his own signature, read calmly aloud by the woman he spent years trying to erase. And then, because Elena Cole had never once in her life done anything without care, she added the detail she'd been carrying quietly for 3 days. "Marcus, you should probably also know the buyout you've been arranging behind Desmond's back, using company funds that are now frozen. That's in the file, too." 2 men who had built an entire scheme on the assumption that a quiet wife would stay quiet-turned, in the same instant, to look at each other, and understood, all at once, exactly how much the other one could cost him. In the weeks that followed, the company Desmond had spent 17 years building came apart along the very seams he'd cut into it himself. Partners stopped returning his calls. The fraud investigation reached first his personal accounts, then the business. The home that had been pledged away without Elena's true signature became the centerpiece of a legal fight her own forged name helped her win outright. Marcus tried first to blame Desmond, then tried to disappear, and managed neither. Bianca left the hotel's suite the same night, walking fast in heels that weren't made for a long walk, because the instant the money became a criminal case instead of a lifestyle, her interest expired as cleanly as a parking meter running out on an empty street. Elena never raised her voice through any part of it. She simply told the truth in the right place, at the right time, and let the paper trail do the rest. Months later, on a quiet porch far from that ballroom, Elena sat with her mother's cedar box open on her lap, the old dream pages still tucked beneath the photocopies that had once been her only weapon. On a fresh page, in her own steady hand, she wrote 4 words her mother would have recognized anywhere. "I kept my home." She closed the box gently. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she realized she wasn't thinking about Desmond at all. That, more than anything else, felt like winning. If Elena's story taught you something tonight about the quiet strength it takes to wait, to plan, and to never let anyone see you shake, follow this page for more interesting stories.